Everyone for joining us. This is Katie Mathias from WCS and the CFA Secretariat, and I am excited by this webinar, which is by the Caribbean Pacific Alliance. We're excited to have them share the collaborations and the programs that they are initiating and implementing. This is part of a series of webinar offerings by the CFA. So I hope that you, I'm thrilled by the turnout, and I hope that you'll continue to check the newsletters for upcoming webinars and continue to join us. I also want to highlight that this is the English version of this webinar, and we're looking to find a date to offer the same content in Spanish for Spanish speakers. So obviously, if you're here, you're comfortable in English, but we will look to reach our Spanish speakers as well. So I am excited to introduce the presenting group. Zdenka Piskulich, who is the Executive Director of Costa Rica Por Siempre, María José Gonzalez, Executive Director of the Mesoamerican Reef Fund, and Marcelo Hernandez, who is the Coordinator of Blue Challenge. So I believe I'm handing it off to Zdenka to kick us off, and I'll do that. Let me just say quickly, ask everyone to keep your microphones on mute. If you have questions, you can pop them into the chat, but we're going to hold the questions until the end and then have hopefully a robust conversation of questions and answers and discussion. Thank you, and I'll hand it off to you.
Well, thank you, Katie, and thank you everyone for joining us for this webinar and for taking this opportunity to learn more about this alliance that we have formed amongst 3 regional conservation trust funds. In itself, each conservation trust fund is an interesting example or case study of bringing together different trust funds and interests from different countries. And all 3 regional trust funds at the same time are marine. We are dedicated mainly to marine conservation. And so this is really an alliance that I think sparks a lot of interest because it joins a large group of countries and of interests into more coordinated actions in favor of marine conservation. So I hope everyone is being able to see what we are putting on the screen. But what you see here is a map that shows the 3 different areas in which these regional trust funds are working. In dark blue are the countries that are covered by the Mesoamerican Reef Fund, which are in Guatemala, Honduras, Belize, and southern Mexico. And this trust fund was created to work in this specific area of the Mesoamerican Reef. And then the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund, which also covers a large set of islands in the Caribbean, and the PACIFICO, which is the regional trust fund working in the Eastern Tropical Pacific, which also covers 4 countries in this area: Costa Rica, Panama, Colombia, and Ecuador. So altogether, these 3 regional trust funds work in 16 countries and represent over 4 million square kilometers of area in which we have direct action, and which includes 5 World Heritage Sites. And so really, in terms of marine conservation for Latin America, these 3 regional trust funds cover a significant portion of the most important marine ecosystems in Latin America, and also work closely and coordinate with other areas not included directly within our scope, such as the case, for example, of Pacifico, working in agreement also with Chile, working all the way up to Mexico, to Baja California. So these are the main, or the nucleus of the areas in which we work, although our conservation work also spans to other areas in Latin America. And so what brought us together in order to do this is a joint interest in learning from each other, both not only in terms of technical expertise, but also in terms of our governance structures. And so the Mesoamerican Reef is the oldest of the 3 regional trust funds. And when we were creating, for example, Pacifico, we looked a lot towards the Mesoamerican Reef to learn what had worked, what hadn't. How do you actually join different different interests from trust funds, from countries, from governments? How do you make them work together? What does the structure look like in terms of actually administering the funds and then granting them out? Do you grant them out on an equal portion to each one of the countries? Do you grant them out according to geographic priorities or thematic priorities, and so on? So there was a lot of interest amongst ourselves to capture lessons learned as we move forward. And in the process, by doing this, we also had the opportunity to realize that if we joined forces, we had an opportunity to have a strong impact in the work that we're doing, both in the Caribbean and Pacific and Latin America. So here's a comparison between the 3 regional trust funds in terms of the geographic area that they cover. These are the specific countries, as I mentioned, in which each one of these trust funds is working. As you can see, it's a large set of islands in the Caribbean, and many of the countries in Latin America are included within the work that is being done by each one of these regional trust funds. And each one has a different set of members. The Mesoamerican Reef Fund has 4 consolidated national trust funds that have been around longer than the Mesoamerican Reef, and that are part of their structure. The Caribbean Biodiversity Fund is a little different. It's actually 1 regional trust fund and up to 8 national environmental funds. And in the case of Pacifico, there's 4 consolidated national funds. And so this is interesting because each trust fund also has the possibility to contribute counterpart funding to help leverage actions. And most importantly, having presence at a local level implies that we can also move in terms of policy. And a lot of our work, of course, is related to governments. It's related to getting governments to enact policies. It's transforming science into decision-making. And so the fact that we have a structure that allows us to coordinate at a regional level, but act at a very local level is really beneficial for these regional trust funds. We are the only 3 regional trust funds that exist in Latin America. And so there's a lot of lessons learned and also strengths in working together and making this happen. And so some of these collaborative work advantages, as I just mentioned, first, it's the fact that we're working at a regional level. So these, So these regional, as regional conservation trust funds, our projects can respond to also regional strategic priorities, but also at a local and regional level. We also have something that makes us very different from other regional initiatives. So, there's other initiatives that are led by bingos, that are led by other larger organizations that are working in the same regions as we are. But what really characterizes the work that we do, our specific niche, is financial sustainability. And that's what makes us different from all the other funds, is that our objective is, just as it is with other conservation trust funds, is to provide financial sustainability that allows us to give recurrent funding, which allows us to be present in the long term, which is something that governments trust, which is something that donors like, and which is something that also guarantees that whatever actions we're doing will be maintained in the long-term process. And something else that is really important is that by working as regional conservation trust funds, we can do more strategic conservation plan, which was in which all the governments also participated. We had different organizations participate. And this regional conservation plan establishes the goals that Pacifico wants to meet in the 25-year period. And it helps you, by doing this planning, be able to say yes or no to governments or to grantees in terms of, well, does this fit within my specific conservation plan? Does it not fit within my specific conservation plan? It helps you have a long-term vision, which governments and other donors and actors appreciate as well. It becomes the backbone for all the work that you do. And it helps you plan financially, because then if you have a 25-year vision, you can plan the actions that it takes to get there, and then you can add a dollar amount to each action, and therefore you know how much money you actually need to get there. So that's something that only a regional conservation trust fund can do at that scale, and that's really a big working advantage of regional conservation trust funds. And if we scale this up one more step and actually think of this alliance between 3 regional trust funds, this allows you to plan for marine conservation activities within the larger scale of Latin America. So it's something that we find has been very, very beneficial in terms of seeing how all 3 regional conservation trust funds are really envisioning their impact in the long term. And in terms of this alliance in general, is the collective knowledge that we have been able to acquire from each other, the possibility of doing exchanges amongst ourselves. And so we spent, for example, a whole workshop where we looked at our governance structures and determined, what works within your board and what doesn't. What happens if your board is not in agreement? How many members should your board have? Should it be smaller, bigger? Should there be veto power from certain funds at certain times? And there was a lot of discussion about this with total honesty and transparency about what has worked and what hasn't within our funds. And so we have been able to exchange experience in this level, and also in terms of technical expertise. And we'll hear a little bit more about this from Marcelo and from María José, in terms of blue economy being one of these areas in which we realized we were all doing little bits and pieces here. And if we all bring it together and exchange experiences, we might be able to take it one step further. Also, institutional strengthening, as I mentioned, in terms of really finding ways to continue to strengthen our funds through knowledge exchange, and coming up with joint initiatives such as the Blue Challenge Initiative, which we will be looking at soon. It's important to mention that this alliance is part of REDLAC, and all 3 regional trust funds are part of REDLAC. And for those of you who do not know REDLAC is the Latin America and Caribbean network of environmental funds. It encompasses over 20 member funds. And the characteristic is that all of the members are conservation trust funds. And so REDLAC's niche really is financial sustainability for Latin America. It's something that REDLAC will turn 20 years old this year. And actually, we just came back from a planning session for REDLAC and describing our niche and the impact that we've had as a network. And this impact includes helping other networks also rise and become really partner organizations, such as CAFE network in Africa, and now the network in Asia. And so we have been able, this that we have learned as trust funds here in Latin America, we have been able to share not only amongst ourselves, but also in other geographies. And what's important here is that REDLAC was the platform that brought us all together. So Costa Rica por siempre, for Costa Rica, the PACIFICO was born out of REDLAC, because we were sitting in REDLAC and started talking to the funds from Colombia and the funds from Ecuador and the funds from Panama, and we're all saying, oh, we're all working in the same ecosystem, the same seascape. How can we actually work together? Let's create a regional trust fund where we can all work together. And this regional trust fund, then, we sat with María José, asked her, how do we move this forward? She gave us some advice. And so let's continue to work together. And, I was doing the same thing directing Caribbean Biodiversity Fund. Let's all get together and talk. So really, REDLAC provides a platform to get all of its different member organizations working together, creating synergies and finding ways to create larger impact. One thing that we were benefited from was through Project K, which is the Knowledge for Action project, funded by a group of organizations, including FFM, MAVA, GF, and UNEP. We received funding, initial funding, to work on a mentoring program. And so this mentoring program was funding that allowed us to analyze our governance structure, our technical structures, our conservation plans, and really understand where we could help each other. We did a SWOT analysis for each one of the funds and looked at our best practices and the problems we shared, and developed a group of recommendations for each fund, which we then took back to our boards in order to move forward. But probably the main thing that resulted from this is that we realized that this was an opportunity not only to join forces and create an alliance, and we signed the alliance in Red Lake and so on, but really to work together in a joint project, because there was so much we had in common that we really found that we could continue to provide impact for the work that we're doing. And that's how the Blue Challenge idea came to be. And so Marcello is going to just tell you a little bit more about the Blue Challenge, how it was born. And this process really is the result of over a year of planning and exchange, where we also brought other partners on board to help strengthen our work, and in which we are finding and seeking ways to really impact the blue landscape in the work that we're doing in Latin America.
Thank you, Zdenka, and thanks to everybody for being here. So yeah, as Zdenka was saying, what we're trying to do here is to put in practice the so-called blue economy, right? But now blue economy can mean different things for different parts of the world. And in Latin America and Caribbean, we have a specific context directly related to specific sectors of the economy that depends on the oceans and marine resources, right? So at the end, what we have behind the concept behind the blue economy is how we can make natural capital, which is that set of assets, marine and coastal assets, to keep providing the services, for example, food, for like fisheries or tourism, which is key for the Caribbean in terms of all those resources, such as the coral reefs that we have there. How can we invest in those areas, in those ecosystems, in those sectors, to make them sustainable through time, and also to make them sustainable in their businesses, so they don't depend on just on a grant, and they keep in a grant trap, as we call, so they can be sustainable through time on their business model. So that's quite a challenge, and all of that. It's why we call it the Blue Challenge, and we just started. So what I'm going to present is just kind of part of the background of our initiative, and also the plan that we have for this year and the upcoming years. As you may know, there's an unprecedented level of interest in blue economy investments in the world, not just in the region. And blue economy has been lately kind of like the buzzword, as it was the green economy in the past, which is also still something that we hear a lot. So we're trying to learn from our green initiatives, our green economy initiatives, and translate those principles and that experience and those lessons learned to the blue realm. So almost more than 1 year ago, in 2017, these alliances Zdenka already told you about joined forces to put in practice what I've been telling you about, and specifically in two sectors, in two economic sectors, which is the seafood sector and the tourism sector. Now I'll tell you a little bit more about our partners in these economic activities, and also we partnered with other investment organization to complement the whole initiative. So the final idea is to how do we make a transition to this blue economy, and by, of course, working together as we already started, we can see how we can fund and invest in different projects, and as I was saying, to as much as possible secure the sustainability of the business model, and making have those market revenues, and making projects that can have those revenues, but hand in hand with very strict environmental and social standards. So the Blue Challenge itself, it's kind of like a partnership. Well, it's not kind of, it's a partnership between the alliance that Zdenka was telling you about, but with other institutions that each one of them give us a specific expertise for what we need. So we have Encourage Capital, we have the Monterey Bay Aquarium, where they're going to help us with all the seafood sector, and we have Sustainable Travel International for dedicated to the tourism sector in the region. And by having this partnership among our these different organizations, we're going to be able to provide local, national, and regional implementation based on already lessons learned, and because we already gathered the know-how on these aspects. And we have proven to have a strong working relationship with the governments at different levels, the local governments, at the national level throughout the region. So that gives us a huge advantage to join forces and make this initiative possible. And well, all of these funds have an impeccable track record on fundraising. So, and also the expertise or where and how to make these investments to make possible this sustainability. So by this, the idea is also not just to have a small project for 1 year. Two is to secure the sustainability of the alliance itself and the Blue Challenge. And by incorporating other stakeholders as the Seafood Watch and the Monterey Aquarium and Sustainable Travel, we also are bringing specific scientific and technical knowledge that is going to help us find where it's going to be our blue niche of investment in this case. And of course, we've proven to have a capacity to convene different sectors, because at the end, what we need is a very participatory approach to this, to hear what are going to be the specific needs in investment, and also what are going to be the specific economic and environmental and social needs to make these investments possible and also sustainable. So in very general terms, the Blue Challenge have a vision statement with these objectives that I've told you about, and we've recognized as in many parts of the world that the coastal and marine business generate significant revenues in the Caribbean and, well, in Latin America and the Caribbean region. And this is mainly to those two sectors that I was telling you about. If we speak of other regions, it could be very different, right? We could have energy, we could have even mining, etc. But for our region, those are the key sectors of doing that. However, not all of those activities are based on a very sustainable approach. So we have a serious environmental and social impacts of these two sectors. So that's what we want to target with our sustainable investments. And we've recognized, and we already identified, that there's many opportunities to use impact-oriented investments for activities that can generate market or near market returns. And of course, at the end, this would lead for a better social and environmental standards and results. And as a whole, this would be what we would understand as a blue economy in this particular region. So yeah, well, I already talked to you a little bit about this. We're gonna try to, well, we're gonna find the ways to mobilize financial and technical support in two sectors specifically, the seafood and tourism, and this is why we partner with those two specific organizations that I told you about. And the main idea is how to shape the funding paradigm to focus on this blue economy. And it's not just to give funds or grants to organizations or communities that want to implement different blue economy initiatives, but it's how to make them survive and keep working beyond the grant period. So that's the impact of the investments that we're trying to find and to connect different actors. And part of this is defining what are going to be these niches of this on the whole grant making cycle, and also to determine the state of the art of these investment schemes to transition to this blue economy. So it's connecting the investors with those that need the investments, and those that need the investments need to comply with certain standards. So the investors would be willing to provide the resources to for their business models that what we expect is to be responsible with the ocean and marine resources. So in a very broad way, for now we have this is kind of like our planning for the next 1 or 2 years. So first we have a phase of as an incubator where we're working or start working right now in conducting situation analysis. And the idea here is to partner with Seafood Watch and Sustainable Travel, as I was saying, to conduct different activities that are going to provide us a better vision of what is the state of the art of the region in this topic. For example, to validate our thesis that sustainable and scalable design environmental projects can find interested and funding from commercial investors, and also quantify the problem and opportunities in the 3 regions that Zdenka explained. Also, in this situation analysis, we want to map local and national capacities and interests, as well as related initiatives and public-private alliances. Specifically for the fisheries sectors, we want to do a fisheries analysis of the size and scale of the artisanal and commercial fisheries, the trade, logistics, and imports and exports, so we have a better idea how the economic activity works here in Latin America and the Caribbean. And for the tourism sector, we want, of course, doing a tourism analysis, specifically an assessment of the tourism sustainability and the tourism impact and opportunities. Also, we want to address potential opportunities for investment and market demand. So, and in other different activities that these situation analysis is going to be our main diagnosis to know where to go from here and put the blue challenge in practice. We already have developed some green investment principles. We want to do the same thing for blue investment principles, and also defining what are the enable conditions to put these investments in practice, and designing an implementation structure. And beyond this, which is going to take a lot of work, then we can identify, okay, what are the organizations, what are the main areas where we can invest based on this initial diagnosis, and that's going to provide us the investment portfolio, and then developing the business models, building capacity in the region, etc., etc. So I'm not going to go in depth of what are going to the next steps. You can have it here. That figure kind of resume or summarizes what we're trying to do, and the end goal, of course, is how to secure a healthy, sustainable blue economy, how to provide the resources to economies or small economies to develop in peace with nature and this case, the blue capital that we depend so much on it. So thank you very much. This is kind of like an overview of what we're doing. Here you have different websites where you can have the contact information for each one of us. The Blue Challenge website's not ready so far, but it's going to be ready in the few weeks. But you can contact us through PACIFICO or the CBF or the MAR Fund. So yeah, I think that would be all from our part. We have also María José Gonzalez here at the call, which she's going to help me address the questions and comments that you may have. And I hope that this initiative will really, you find it very interesting and that we can collaborate together. I think it's a very, we have a big challenge in front of us, and we really need as much as help as possible. And having you here, I think it's a good signal that we're going to get that help that we so much need. So thank you everybody for being here, and thank you for CFA for hosting this presentation. And I'm here to hear if you have any comments or any questions. So thank you very much.
Great. Marcelo and Zdenka, thank you so much for this presentation. It was wonderful to hear. I'm going to open it up to questions and ask you to raise your hand in the chat window, and I'll call around. The first question that came up from Esther was to ask for more information about the governance structure, and I'm not sure whether that was the governance structure of the regional CTFs or of the alliance as a whole. But maybe you could talk a little bit to how these alliances and regional CTFs are structured.
Sure. Maybe María José can give you more details about this. If you're there, yeah. María José.
I'm here. Yes, thank you. If it's each individual regional fund structure, we can share that. We have the organograms, I think is maybe the word in English, and we're happy to share that. Each one has a completely different structure, which is also very interesting how each one is set up. Now, regarding the Blue Challenge governance structure, that is something that we will be working on now, precisely as we develop our strategic plan to also define that, how our partnership structure and governance will be set up. So we don't have that yet.
Great, Maria Jose, thank you. Scott, I think, does not have audio, so I'm going to read his question. Scott Layman has asked, does the Blue Challenge work like a cost share grant program? Sorry, I just lost my chat window moved. Does the Blue Challenge work like a cost share grant program? Also, Scott points out that he has some impact investment principles and indicators that that he can share as you further explore this.
Thank you. A cost share grant program. We are foreseeing that this could be, what we would end up being is like a technical assistance facility that, yes, would be providing initially grants to strengthen the market capacity of potential projects in fisheries and tourism initially. So I don't know if that is what Scott was thinking about. Now, regarding the principles, thank you very much, Scott. That would be very helpful. We know that there are other sets of principles that have been put out, and we think that that is very interesting. We don't want to reinvent anything at all, but rather gather what is out there and work with those and actually try to put some of those to test. We are doing that. We're going to begin doing that in the Mesoamerican Reef region initially, and I'm hoping that that will serve for the rest of the region, of the 3 regions we're working at. Specifically for wild-caught fisheries, there are principles that EDF prepared with other partners. And some of these principles do not have the exact criteria of how you actually apply them and then measure them. So we will be working on that in this year, hopefully, for the Mesoamerican Reef and then share out. So yes, thank you for that information. That would be very, very useful. I don't know, Scott, if that replied to your question. I know you only have access to the chat.
Let's maybe move on to the next question, and I'll keep an eye open for more chats from Scott.
Sure.
The next question is from Stacy. Stacy, do you want me to read it, or do you want me to just maybe hand the microphone over to you to frame your question? Oh, I'll read it. Okay. So Stacy's question was, she's not clear on how the regional funds tie into the investment portfolio, and so is looking for more explanation. So there are the regional funds, the Caribbean Pacific Alliance, and then Blue Challenge, and maybe more clarity on how those all tie together.
Oh, okay. We know that, and I'm sure you all know that there are capital funds that want to fund marketable projects that respond to sustainable use principles. And however, there is really not a pipeline of projects out there that are ready to be invested in, for these market funds to come and invest directly. Because there are several projects, and although our focus is fisheries and tourism, we've also been discussing, for example, solid waste is another potential market area. So there are initiatives that are ongoing in these three regions where the Caribbean Pacific Alliance operates, but they are lacking different aspects to actually be able to get, to scale to market, or to scale to a level where an investor can come and invest in this company and take it to a larger scale. And we think that the niche for the Blue Challenge is precisely this: to look for these initiatives and provide the assistance that they need to take them to market. So what aspect of that market development process is needed? Maybe they need to upgrade their production capacity, or how they're fishing, or the traceability of the products, or just having a better financial and market plan or business plan. And the idea is that the Blue Challenge will allow us as environmental funds, regional environmental funds, to provide that capacity, that technical assistance, so that these potential projects in our regions can then be subject of investment and be taken to scale. And the reason why we see this as our potential niche is because we work, although we work regionally, we know those actors in the region, right, at the local level, and we can be that link to take, to provide follow-up for this technical assistance and make them come to that level then where market investors can come in. I don't know if that responds to the question. No, the regional, I'm sorry, I'm reading the chat from Stacy, and she's asking if the regional funds would provide capital for this. We need to raise funds to provide the technical assistance to bring these projects to the level where the capital funds can then invest in them. Stacy, does this respond to your question?
So her follow-up question is, how does this benefit the regional fund?
Well, I would think it's the other way around. We see the regional funds as being a potential service provider and technical assistance provider for these types of projects in our regions. And I think it's just an additional role that we can play in the region to, provide the capacity so projects can go to scale, and if they comply with blue principles or sustainable use principles. So it's not that it benefits us. I think it's the other way around, that the regional funds can provide this benefit because currently there is not a pipeline of projects out there that can go to market at this point. For now, David, responding to your question, which is, will we go beyond technical assistance and make proper investments along with the impact investors? At this point, we are thinking that no, that would not be our role. Our role would be to provide the technical assistance at this point. Down the line, that may change, but right now we're just starting. So we're doing that, our strategic planning, we're doing the analysis of the situation in these different markets. So that may change, but at the moment it's technical assistance.
This is Katie. I just wanted to build on Maria Jose's response to Stacy's question to say that the other argument or rationale that I have heard for conservation trust funds being involved in impact investing, being involved in developing a pipeline, is simply that it's another way to achieve the mission of biodiversity conservation. So as conservation trust funds are diversifying their approaches to funding streams and diversifying the mechanisms that they use to achieve conservation, yes, in this case, they're providing technical assistance, but they're achieving better conservation in their in the regions where they work, and so that's a good thing.
Exactly, Katie, and I think here the difference is that is why it is so important to apply good principles for these commercial practices, right? The blue principles or sustainable principles, whatever you want to call them, for the different types of activities. It cannot be just market. It has to be, getting to market, but assuring that it is sustainable, that and that resources are being restored continuously.
There's another question from David, which is, there's an interesting connection between enabling policy and preparing the ground for sustainable investments. Can you leverage the partnership for this, and how?
I think we can. It will depend. It will go on a case-by-case process, probably. As Zdenka mentioned, the three regional mechanisms and the individual funds that integrate each one do have a relationship with the national government or even the regional government structures, and that is where we do have that possibility of trying to move forward policy. If it's a barrier in a certain situation, if that is a barrier, then we can also provide that support and move that way. We do have those channels of communication open.
More questions? I know there must be more out there. It's also fine, by the way, to just raise your hand in the chat, and then I'll hand the microphone over to you.
I just wanted to comment very briefly on what María José was saying, and one important thing is that countries, at least in our region, are starting to understand what a blue economy is, and so that's quite important, because that are gonna give us the guidelines and on or the path towards we're gonna direct our project, and I think both the policymakers and kind of like the initiative that we have here are gonna feed to each other in this realm of on investments and policy, because we're gonna develop some of the instruments and the knowledge that they need also to understand what are going to be the key sectors and the key areas to develop a better economy, better blue economy for each one of the countries in the region. In the region that we have also, it's very different, the countries, the reality of each country in the policy arena, it's quite different. So that's also part of the challenge and the opportunity that we have here.
Untitled, thanks. One thing I wanted to clarify, because I got a question, is how do you raise your hand in the chat? You can just literally just type hand up, and then I'll call on you. It's the chat equivalent of actually raising your hand. Stephen has a question, and I think, Stephen, I'm going to have you turn on your mic if you can and ask it, which may be better than me reading it.
Okay, is the mic on? Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you just fine.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. Just a quick introduction. My name is Stephen McCormick. I'm currently working with WCS in Myanmar on the establishment of a CTF there. We're in the very early stages of helping the steering committee understand what a CTF looks like, and in particular, were they to get a pot of money, how this might be managed. One of the questions that's come up is the degree to which the various CTFs around the world are pooling funds, either in common portfolios or with the use of common investment managers. So one of the questions I had for yourselves in the Caribbean Pacific Alliance is the degree to which you are either have pooled portfolios or are using common investment managers. I know that's a bit broader than the Blue Challenge, so if it's not an appropriate question, I'm happy to take the answer offline.
Hello, Stephen. No, not at all. Among the members of, or between the members of the Alliance, we are not currently pooling funds for investments, nor sharing investment managers. However, there is funds in Europe are pooling funds, and afterwards, if you can give me your email here, I can look up that information and send it to you so you can get in touch with them.
This is Katie. I'm also going to pipe in to add, we had a webinar on the Nature Trust Alliance, which is that pooling.
Yes.
And so that is available as a recording on the CFA website. And I think the PowerPoint is there as well. But the other point to raise is that the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund itself is an example of a pooling. It's not, because of the way that it was structured, rather than having each of the individual trust funds in the island nations in the Caribbean create their own infrastructure, the central CBF serves as the pooled investment vehicle. So that's not exactly, I think, what Stephen's describing, but it is an example of a pooled fund model that we highlight.
Great. So I guess you'll have the more detailed information with what the presentation that Katie will be sharing with you, Stephen.
We have I think we have time for one more question if there is one. From Scott. I'll read it. Several impact investment funds have their own impact principles and indicators. Does your partner encourage capital have its own set? Some donors, where they support these investment funds, add their own indicators as sub-agreements, as USAID did with the Sustainable Oceans Fund.
Yes, they do have their own set of principles. And you're right, it is because some of these, or several of these investment funds are being funded by organizations such as USAID. So you're right, they do have them. And still, I think it is important to see the whole universe of principles out there, and especially how you take them to the ground, right? How you actually apply them and can measure whether they are being applied, and you are to the best degree possible, trying to ensure sustainability of the resources. But yes, they do have them.
Great. I want to say thank you to Marcelo, Zdenka, and María José for this presentation, which was very informative and interesting and describing, I think, a process that a number of organizations are thinking about. So we'll be interested in the collaboration process and seeing how you move forward and in how we can all work to support this effort. More broadly, I want to thank everyone for joining in the webinar. Just as part of a wrap up, all of our webinars are recorded and put up on the CFA website. So if you want to revisit something from this one or see one that you missed previously, you can find them at conservationfinancealliance.org. We encourage you, if you are not currently receiving our newsletter, to go to our website and you can either join and become a member, or you can sign up for the newsletter and see what's upcoming. And as a teaser, we have another webinar coming up at the end of February. We're still pinning down the specific times and dates, so we'll get that information out as soon as we can, but it will be on finance tools for coral reefs and for coral reef protection. So we'll look forward to getting that information out to you all as soon as possible. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you very much, Katie. Thank you all.
Thank you, and thanks everybody for being here, and it was our pleasure to present this and to hear back from you.
Hold on this side.